Well, good morning. We got some video clips this morning and comments to go with them. I don't have any still photos much except for the one you see on the screen now. But let me see if I can show you guys some of these clips, and I'll let the clip play and then I'll talk about it some. Is it high pressure or low pressure that's causing it to cycle? Well, let me ask you this. That was a situation where the AC was cutting out whenever it was, and the pressure actually was going up too high on the right side, so we didn't have any cooling after it started to warm up a little bit. And we used to see this every now and then, and what we like to do is take a little shop fan and a little small one and put right in front of the and blowing through the grill so that we can get some good airflow across the condenser if it's not clogged up with crud. And if you could tell basically that the problem was high pressure. That's what I was leading this video to do, is the pressure was going really high to the point that it was cutting it out. R12 systems wouldn't typically cut out because of high pressure. They would just blow the pop-off valve on the compressor. But our 134 systems will typically have a high pressure cutout switch, and that's what's going on here. It seems to me like we have blocked condenser airflow, but here is another one that had a similar problem after we fixed it.
Here we have static pressure on both gauges on this 98 Acura. Start it up and turn on the AC. Alright, you notice the low side's going down and the high side's going up. We had the condenser fan was disconnected earlier. We found that out. It appears to be running now. Oh yeah. Yeah, the condenser fan's running now, and that was very good. She picked up on that earlier. She said it's running a little high head pressure there. And look at the low side and the high side are both running lower since we have the condenser fan operational now. Cool.
You got to remember that if ambient temperature outside is higher, these pressures are going to be a little higher on the same car than they would be in cooler ambient temperatures. That's why sometimes in cooler ambient temperatures, even if the charge is normal, if it's like 50 degrees outside, you may see it cycling off and on because temperature and pressure are highly related on these. That's one of the reasons why a lot of times you'll have a temperature scale inside here and a pressure scale on the outside. And it'll basically give you an idea of what the temperature of the refrigerant is based on the pressure. And that they correlate very closely like that. Of course, you need to keep these gauges zeroed. You can take these covers off, well, pop that little thing off, and use that little screw adjuster about there to zero your gauge whenever there's no pressure on it, if you wanted to make sure that it's, starts out at zero and all. Anyway, this particular one here was an airflow problem across the condenser too that the student figured out. Actually realized that the condenser fan wasn't running, and it pretty much ought to run anytime. If it's an electric one, it ought to run anytime the AC is operating, because that airflow across the condenser is critical.
It makes it cooler, and it does away with a lot of brake pulsation issues and stuff. As a matter of fact,
since my program was NATEF certified, now they call it ASEP, I think, instead of NATEF, but I was required to have an on-car brake lathe. That was a required tool. And so at the time, because of the budget constrictions, this was the only one I could afford. And this one here, believe it or not, was American made up in Wisconsin. But it was very dangerous. It was annoying to set it up. You had to do all kinds of, jump through all kinds of hoops to get it, mounted and everything. You could do it pretty quick once you got used to it. But the way that thing was connected to that hub, if it wasn't done just exactly right, then that shaft with the U-joints in it, and when if that thing popped loose from that hub, that shaft with the U-joints in it starts slinging around you know, like a club, and it had a potentially to hurt somebody. And well, I used this for a little while, but as soon as I could replace it with something better, I did. But it was, you know, something somebody came up with. If they'd have had a better way of connecting that motor to that rotor hub, it would be all right. Now, what I also would do sometimes was I would connect the machining part of it, and I would let the vehicle put it in gear on the lift and let it drive the wheels that way without even using this silly motor and stand setup. And that was a pretty doggone good setup, but you can't do it on the back wheels on a front wheel drive car if you're doing an on car rotor machining on the back. Yep. Set this thing up to turn a drum, and it's turning the drum. I bought this machine whenever I had opened that new automotive program in the town up the road. They had me, you know, the college had me to go up there and launch a new program, and I would go over there toward the end of my teaching career. I'd have to go there in the mornings and then go to the college in the afternoons, and my adjunct instructor would have to, you know, cover for me in the mornings, and that was a real meat grinder. But this is a neat little rotor and drum turning machine. I don't remember the brand name of it, and I feel stupid because I actually engineered the purchase of this, and I don't remember what it cost either, but it worked real smooth, and I had a lot of fun with this thing. And it was fairly easy to convert it from rotor to drum. It didn't take long to do, and it wasn't hard to do, and the thing was easy to use. And you might notice it spun that rotor really, really fast, you know. Anyway, that was just an interesting little thing I thought you might like. Notice how this one here is making these little circles. That's on purpose. That gives it a non-directional cut. And this is the other one I bought for that program that I launched in that town up the road. And this was a really, really good machine. I liked this one, and one of the reasons I liked this one because it was very easy to set it up. Once you got it mounted on there, you could actually press a little button and it would automatically calibrate itself to where it was perfectly straight. Kind of hard to explain unless you've done one of these. Long years ago, you used to have, when these things first came out, you had to use a dial indicator and all kinds of stuff to set them up. This one here, when you mashed that little button, it would make little boop 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 noises, and it was perfectly true when it got through. It was so easy to set this thing up, and it did such a beautiful job. Of course, you had this little dish down here to catch all your filings and everything. Incidentally, there was this retired lieutenant colonel came up there to get some brake drum filings from me to fertilize his pecan tree. But Aaron, you know, he's broadcasted it out there so his pecan tree would do better.
All right, let's watch this. We got a coolant leak. All right.
You might notice that hose had seen its better days. The clamp was even biting into the rubber. If you watch that video again, down there, that one needed to be replaced really bad. But it's interesting how those things just spring a leak, even though nothing touched them from the inside. They corrode to the point where they start leaking. I've had that happen on my vehicle. It had happened on my Taurus when we were on a trip, and I had to fix that a hose like that with duct tape so we could make it home. All right, this is the front and the rear oxygen sensors, and they're switching at the same rate, which tells us that the catalytic converter that's in between those two oxygen sensors has gone bad and is not storing oxygen the way that it should. All right, that's actually a pretty good indication, you know, of if these are matching each other, you know that catalytic converter is not storing oxygen. And I always like to take these videos for instructional purposes. It always worked really smooth. And this little Autel Maxi Diag was a pretty good little, fairly inexpensive Autel tool, and that I enjoyed. Okay, we're doing a voltage drop test on the solenoid. on this starter because it barely will spin. Now he's going to energize the starter, and we're going to see what our voltage drop is across the solenoid windings. Go for it. Golly, we're dropping 10. All right. It's horrible. That's absolutely horrible. And now you can actually run a screwdriver across the two big terminals, and it sort of spins, but it barely will. That means that voltage drop and that low voltage from it has burned the starter up. So we are got to get a starter, but the stupid parts house don't have a starter for an Impala in stock. Who in the world would have ever thought that? If you have voltage drop anywhere in a circuit that's feeding current to a starter, low voltage will burn up a starter. And a lot of the times, see, this is I had seen this, I didn't even start thinking about checking voltage drop across the inside, you know, this big copper washer that slaps against these two big terminals. If there's voltage drop inside this thing, it will drop voltage going to the starter and it will destroy the starter. Now the significance of this is when you replace the starter, you're replacing this too. But this one here was destroyed by the solenoid, believe it or not. And that wasn't the first time I'd seen that. There was one that was mysteriously, this actually had voltage drop inside the solenoid, but there was another one, a Mazda I showed, that there was voltage drop in the circuit that was going to this little terminal that energizes the solenoid. And so this solenoid is basically a contactor, is what the air conditioner people that work with high voltage, but this is basically high current. And on your hybrid EVs, they got these contactors that whenever they are energized, they slam that contact together really hard and really fast, so to minimize any kind of arcing whatsoever, because if they don't, those contacts won't last very long. Well, that Mazda had burned up a starter, and the guy put a used starter on it, and in a short order it burned that one up. We got a new starter from the part store, put it on there, and within a very few starts it burned that one up. And what I determined was, from the battery, and you can go to the battery with your meter and go to that little terminal on the starter and have somebody spin it over, you ought not to have any voltage drop there, or very, very little. If you're dropping, let's say, 3 or 4 volts between the battery positive terminal and that little terminal on the starter, meaning there's a voltage being lost somewhere in between the battery positive terminal and the little terminal on the starter, then that contactor is going to pull in slowly, and it's going to scorch those things, and it's going to start developing voltage drop like you see here, and then it's going to wind up destroying the starter. That's something that's often overlooked, and I've never seen anybody teach this in any electrical school I've ever been to. But voltage drop is a really important thing to understand, and I've got a bunch of videos talking about it on my channel. This is an endurance exercise for fundamental students. We're going to see if they have what it takes to go the distance. Also, it gives them a little bit of an idea about how to use a hacksaw. This is an endurance exercise. I had this piece of a front end bar, it was a drag link off a van or something, and I cut this piece off. And I would have these students, the ones that wanted to, I didn't force everybody to do this, but what I would do is I would let some of them compete against one another to see how fast they could take a good or a new saw blade and saw that thing off. And amazingly enough, if I had, that one semester I had 4 girls and 6 boys or something, I can't remember, it was a bunch of girls in there. The girls were really excited about trying this. A lot of the boys wouldn't even pick up the hacksaw. They didn't want to fool with it, and so I mean, like I say, it wasn't a requirement, it was something that I encouraged them to do. And once they got it cut off, they had what you might consider a little disc, and there was kind of like a coin if they started and it made it thin enough. And what we'd do is polish it up and clean it up real good, and then I would stamp their initials on it and give it to them as a souvenir. But what I would do is I would get with the saw, and I'd get a saw with a good blade, and then I would say, okay, time me and see how long it takes to cut this off. And if you're sawing good and straight, and you're good with the saw, and you're making nice clean strokes, this is not a hard piece of steel. It's thick and it's heavy. It's intimidating for somebody that hasn't used a hacksaw very much, but you can saw the thing off in just a couple of minutes, if you make good strong strokes and you got a good, you know, good blade that's got fairly coarse teeth and all this kind of thing. But that was just something that I would basically say, we're going to see if you have what it takes to actually do it. Some people, like I say, were just so intimidated by this. And some of these big muscled up guys I had, they wouldn't even pick up the saw. They wouldn't even want to fool with it. But what amazed me was how many of those girls wanted to give it a try, and a lot of them completed it, you know.
You can see a little bit of movement from the tire right here. Look, we got us a bad tire.
How fast you
We're
going?
not really seeing anything like that.
Huh? How fast you going?
We ain't getting nothing like that on the rim. We're just getting it on the tire.
Yeah.
See that?
Get a look at it. Hear that?
That's a bad tire. You know, a lot of the times you'll see a tire that looks pretty good, and there'll be some stuff wrong with it you won't recognize until you get it up there and you start watching it while somebody drives it on the left, or if you spin it by hand if it's on the rear. And that was one of the standard things that we would always do. They can pull, they can make noise, they can do all kinds of stuff, but that rim was not bent, but you notice the tire was not running true. And so that was basically, there's nothing to do but replace the tire on one like that. But sometimes, to make sure the tire is what your problem is, you need to swap the tire from one side to the other in the front and drive to see if it pulls the opposite direction or see if the noise moves.
Yeah, that's a good point. Almost looks like a warped wheel, doesn't it? This other one over here is turning smooth. That one there. Yeah. Now if I come out here, I'm not seeing that out here at all. You notice that? But in here, and under there. All right, in light of this new development here, what I want to do is I want to move the tires side to side in the front. Then we're going to drive it again and see if the noise changes. Okay.
Now that one obviously was going to have a wheel, but we were looking for a noise. Surprisingly enough, the only symptom that made was a noise. But somebody hit a pothole or something really hard to bend that rim like that. And you'd be surprised if you do tires and wheels all the time, it's really not unusual at all to see bent wheels. Even steel wheels get bent like that. But that particular one, you know, of course, you're telling them, look, you know, you can show the customer this. Look at this wheel. You know, it's you just telling them they need a wheel and them saying, oh, okay. You know, I took the video to show them you're going to have a wheel. But just to see if that was the noise. Now, if you replace the wheel and they still got the noise, they'll think, well, I didn't need the wheel. And so you say you're going to swap from one side to the other, you're going to see if the noise moves with it, and then you sell them a wheel, you know, in the final analysis and all.
It doesn't do any better than that. Timing changed into 5.4, and this is the girl that did it. Her and McBride. McBride deserves a little bit of credit anyway, doesn't he? All right, so looks good, runs good, sounds good, and we weren't even sure if it had any other problems, but the guy wanted to do the timing chains. So we got new timing chains, new cam phasers. We got a little bit invested in this, but it turned out to be a really good job. 2005 F-150 5.4 3-valve. Got new plugs in it too. We would have been dumb not to put new plugs in it.
This particular one here came in here towed on a trailer, and the guy had bought it for his son, and I don't remember if it quit running or if he bought it not running or what, but seems to me like he bought it and it was making timing chain racket, and then the engine died, you know, it just quit running. So he brought it in there, and that was one where I says, look, you probably should replace the engine in this thing. And no, he wanted to try to go ahead and fix it because we didn't charge labor anyway. But we put timing chains, phasers, the roller rockers on this head over here, full set of those. The ones on the other side looked okay. But his issue was he had low oil pressure, and the low oil pressure had made it. If you've got less than 25 psi of oil pressure on one of these 3 valves, it's going to let the timing chains rattle when the oil gets hot. And you know, I says we put an while we had the timing chain off, we put an oil pump on it, and we got it where it was better. Got it running. It was running really good and really smooth. But by the time the smoke cleared on this thing, and we kept, you know, having to add more stuff to it as we found stuff, and we got in there so deep, he wound up with $2,500 invested in this thing, and it still barely was making that 25 psi. And I believe one of the cylinder heads, or maybe both of them, had oil pressure leaking out around the cam saddle caps, and the cam shafts don't have bearings. They just spin, you know, kind of like the, you know, a lawnmower doesn't have bearings typically, or some of the small cheap lawnmower engines have an aluminum connecting rod with no bearings. It just clamps together around there and lets the rod be the bearing. But you can buy replacement cam bearing caps. I mean cam caps, cam saddle caps for vehicle. If you look them up, you can buy them. And sometimes whenever you have low oil pressure like that, you can replace those caps, and it may help. You know, so one way or another, I told this guy, I said, this thing's running just fine, but you're still going to have trouble because you don't have enough oil pressure. We even replaced the main bearings in it. But it wasn't making any noise in the lower bearing, but it had to have been in the cam area. Anyway, I told the guy, I said, if you're going to let your son drive this thing, get all this, you know, try to drive this money out, just, you know, put some heavier oil in there. You know, that's the only thing I could tell him to do, and he fully understood. He had a good attitude about it. He paid the bill, went his way, got it running, but he really needed to swap this engine out. And that was just me talking, you know, but one way or another, we don't have to guarantee anything in the work we did at the college. And so, of course, a lot of the times if something went sour, I would make sure it was made good and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes I'd pay for the repairs out of my own pocket to keep the college automotive department from getting a blemish. You know, if it was something that I felt like was questionable. That didn't happen very often, but sometimes I would. You hear that noise? I'm hearing it really loud right here.
I don't think the camera's going to pick it up.
Sounds pretty loud up in here sometimes. I was mystified by this noise, but I believe, in all honesty, and some of you guys probably already know this, that what it turned out to be was the throttle body. The electronic throttle body sometimes will make a racket like that. Even with the key switched on, engine not running, it'll make that resonant whistling noise, which I thought was very interesting. It was, you don't usually hear that, but on this one here, it was just like, what is that noise this thing's making? It was a very strange, unusual noise for a vehicle to be making just because you had the key switched on, you know. What we got here is a power door lock board. And what you do is memorize these wires right here. It's coming off of that 12-volt power supply. We got 2 relays, we got 2 switches, we got an actuator, and I got them all hooked up the way Ford used to do in their training. This was a little tabletop exercise board that I built with a couple of relays, and of course I got the schematics over here, and I wanted them to be able to wire this up so that they would understand how these relays and these door locks and all this stuff work together. That's actually an actuator from a 2002 Crown Victoria that I bought new, that I put on the board. Now I had to put a little stop bolt here. When it would run out, it would hit that bolt and it would go back and all that. But I always had fun building this kind of thing. Ford Motor Company at the training centers have similar boards to this that they build, not just like this one, but they'll have little clear plexiglass boards with bolts and, you know, schematics on them that you have to hook stuff up. And one of my students, who's now a Ford Senior Master, has been working for years at his Ford place over here, does all kinds of work, diesels, transmissions, electronics, anything he does it. But he was telling me that when he went to the Ford school, it was so easy to do these boards and during the breaks and the lunchtime, he would teach some of the other students how to do this because they were just bumfuddled. And I'm talking about people that were professional dealership mechanics like him would go, and he said, because of the way that you set those boards up at the school, I was able to figure this stuff out real easy. Of course, he's pretty sharp anyway. But he talks like a hillbilly, sort of like me, but he's sharp as a tack. Anyway, he said he learned an awful lot from wiring this stuff up. Y'all have seen these other boards that I've built a similar way. But if the student has to wire it up to get it to work, they understand how it works. And they're also, sometimes I'd throw a bad jumper wire in the mix. And even if they had it wired up right, then they'd have to take their little test light and troubleshoot where the open circuit was. So there's all kinds of good little exercises you can do on stuff like this if you're trying to teach somebody else, you know. If you're a professional mechanic and you're not teaching anybody else, you don't have time to fool with this. But when I became an instructor, after 25 years in the field, I became an instructor for another 19 years, and I really enjoyed that.
Okay, this Nissan here is sounding like the flywheel's turning, but the engine's not. So we're going to have him try to spin it over. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Dakota. That's spinning. Do it again. Okay, there's nothing spinning here, but we're spinning there. And it's like the flywheel has completely come loose from the crankshaft.
That's what happens when somebody has a cracked flywheel and they ignore the noise and just keep driving it. Sooner or later, that little bolt circle in the middle is the only thing that's still connected to the crankshaft, and the rest of the flywheel is just spinning. And so we had to pull it apart. But what you do need to be aware of, though, in a situation like that, in some cases, it will have heated things up back there at the back to where you're going to need to put a rear main seal in it. So you need to do that anyway. If you're pulling one down and you got the flywheel off, the rear main seal is just right there. Go ahead and put a rear main seal in it instead of not noticing that and then finding out you got an oil leak when it's all over with. Well, we've been here 27 minutes. I hope you guys lasted all the way through. I know I look at the way this goes. A lot of people will, if I've got a 27 or 28 minute video, they'll drop out after about 10 minutes like I'm tired of listening to me talk or don't feel like they're getting anything out of it. And I hope you guys got something out of it. Tell me how you liked it and if you like these video clips, and I will be in touch with you guys again next week. See you next time.